Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Hello, my friends, and happy new year. Are you ready to have the very best year you've ever had in your marriage? I'm ready. Are you on board? I'm going to help you make that happen this year. So I've got some powerful things headed your way this whole year. And it starts with, today's podcast, of course. And next week, the Stop Taking It So Personally challenge for highly sensitive women. This is a challenge I'm running for 7 days so you can feel a whole lot less hurt and more love in your relationship. It's totally free, so you've got to sign up. Whether you've done this before or not, I have hosted this challenge. It's been a long time since I've hosted it before, and it's revised and updated. But you are not going to want to miss this. So go sign up. We start January 12th. That's a week from the day this podcast comes out that you're listening to now. So you've got to sign up. It's the link to sign up is in the show notes, or you can just head over to www.lifeisworthloving.com/ that's like a / stop taking it so personally. So I know so many of you feel more unhappiness and pain than you'd ever want to in your marriage. So in this challenge, you're going to actually put an end to so much of that by learning how to not take things so personally. And you're going to really apply, step by basic step, the things you need to stop the totally unnecessary pain of taking things personally. This is a place that this is a pain that does not need to be happening at all for you, right? And we're going to bring in way more room in your relationship for love and all the fun things that you want, all the good experiences that you're wanting. And we're going to have a lot of fun doing it together too over these 7 days. So go sign up for the Stop Taking It So Personally challenge. I'm thrilled to be starting the year off with this event for you. But today, I want to start this new year and the most amazing and joyful changes in your marriage now. So today we're going to talk about something that sounds very dry and maybe even is a turnoff. The word itself feels like ugh, to some of you, not self-responsibility. And how taking responsibility for the pain you feel in your relationship can actually be the most empowering and fun experience instead of it feeling crappy like happens for so many of you. Now, I've talked about self-responsibility before a lot in this podcast. In fact, it's the underpinnings for everything on this podcast and ultimately having the best marriage. And really, it's essential, right? Without self-responsibility, you simply cannot make the changes in your marriage you want. But with it, you can create what actually feel like miracles in your marriage. So I've talked about it before on the podcast, but I've never dedicated a full episode just to self-responsibility. So I wanted to do this special episode now to jumpstart the new year, really dedicating this podcast episode to this non-optional key to a thriving marriage. Now, it is optional if you're willing to wait and hope your partner will suddenly magically become everything you've ever dreamed a man could be. But it's not optional if you want to actually make your real human marriage with a real human being the very best relationship possible. Or if you're just not willing to keep waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. You don't have to wait to make your marriage come alive in the ways you want it to. And it just takes self-responsibility as the initiating thing to do that. So we're going to talk about it, and we're going to make it fun. We're going to help you make it fun instead of feeling crappy. All right. So if you've listened to my podcast before, you know I talk a lot about how we cannot make our partners change, and that the only way to a marriage that you love is by changing what is in your control, right? You and your internal world. Of course, that always influences your partner, but we can't start by trying to change our partner or control him. I kind of use those two words interchangeably, change and control him. So I want to say, you have to know that I really don't love bearing the first part of this news to people, right? This part about you can't control him, you can't change him. I don't love that, because I sure wish I had a magic wand that I could just wave over you and your partner, and he would be that perfect partner that you've always dreamed of, right? That would be amazing. But that's not possible. So I don't love bearing that news, but I do love it once it clicks with you, with people, that they are responsible for their experience and their ways of being in their marriage. Then, once that clicks for people, then I feel like I just handed them the winning ticket to $1 billion lottery. Because getting this, that you are responsible for your experience of, and even kind of the outcome, the way your marriage is, getting that is really the ticket to the love lottery. Now, if you haven't gotten this fully yet, you are losing out majorly on having the marriage you want. It is costing you love, connection, happiness, fulfillment, laughter, joy, passion, and all of it. Self-responsibility is the ticket to having all of that. Now, again, the bad news is we cannot control what our partners do and don't do, even though we do try, right? It's really our human instinct to try to control or change those things outside of us, right? The circumstances around us, the things people say or do, particularly when it comes to our husband, right? I know so many of you relate to that, right? The instinct as humans is to try to change the thing we perceive as being the source of our pain or the problem that we're experiencing. Yeah. But that approach almost always fails and backfires and actually causes us more suffering. A sense of frustration, anger, helplessness, disappointment, all the things. Yeah. So this is why I talk so much about taking the counterintuitive route, right? Instead of blaming or looking outside of ourselves to fix our experience, I advocate going to the place where we actually have some power, which is our internal world inside of ourselves, right? Taking responsibility for your experience. Another way of putting this is ownership. Owning your experience, taking ownership of that. And I would go as far to say the key is to take 100% responsibility for your experience, for how your inner world responds to things that go on outside of you, like things your partner does, says, ways he acts, things he doesn't do. Yeah? I am not saying take responsibility for his actions, but take responsibility for how you relate to those things, those actions. 100% responsibility, because that will determine 100% of your experience of it and in your marriage. Now, this might sound super radical, but it really isn't as radical as it may sound at first. This is actually what all the teachers and experts in marriage and love and life success, all the teachers of those things whose clients and students get the best results. This is what they teach. 100% responsibility. And I think that sounds really radical because we just aren't familiar with doing it and we're uncomfortable with doing it, right? It really can be hard to do that, at least at first, especially if you don't understand a few things. And that's oftentimes because we don't understand it, so we're making mistakes with it. But the truth is, taking 100% responsibility can be fun and empowering and truly the best thing ever. So we're going to dive into all of that in a moment because I really want you to be able to enjoy it instead of avoiding it like so many people do, because it truly is the ticket to the marriage you want. It's like the underlying ticket. It's like the foundation. So first, we're going to define what self-responsibility is, right? So you can understand this best. And I want you to bear with me on this part because actually what I most want to share comes after I share this definition, right? Like what makes self-responsibility feel so bad and what will make it feel amazing to you. But first, I just want to make sure you understand what self-responsibility even is. So all of this makes sense. So let's just start with the word responsibility. Responsibility is simply the ability to respond to something rather than to react to it, kind of on default or on autopilot, right? So self-responsibility, right? Self-responsibility is the ability to respond to what's going on within you and around you instead of just react from it and to it. It's really all about how much power you're accessing from inside of you in the moment to create what's aligned with what you want to feel, with who you really are, with what you value, right? With the goals you have in your life. It's about accessing that power. And without it, we're not accessing that power. Right? So self-responsibility is taking that power or owning that power that we have over, basically our experience in our life. So I love to call it owning your power. And actually, as part of my process I take my clients through, one of the steps is being responsible. And I love calling that actually, because what it really is owning your power. And learning how to tap into that isn't as simple as just like, well, be responsible, own your power, right? Like it's multifaceted, but totally doable and accessible. So taking self-responsibility 100% is truly the key to freeing yourself from any pain you are experiencing in your life and your marriage and feeling any way you want to feel in your life and marriage. 100% self-responsible means you are responsible for taking care of the hurts inside you, the old wounds that color your life in the present, right? The old conditioning that is no longer serving you and moving yourself out of that, right? It means you're responsible for taking care of the way you're perceiving and reacting and shifting that to ways that feel aligned with what you want and who you want to be. Now, none of this is hitched to anything anyone else does. Now, of course, the way your husband shows up is going to inform how you take that responsibility, right? How you work with yourself in the specific situation, right? For you to have the best experience and outcome in your marriage. So you don't exist in a vacuum, right? I totally get that. And so, of course, sometimes taking 100% self-responsibility is going to mean at times, for some of you, it's going to mean setting boundaries, saying no, making sure you're safe, both physically and emotionally, right? Being responsible for both your own physical and emotional safety. Right? It's not going to mean like, well, I'm 100% responsible for my experience, so I'm just going to sit here and let him call me mean names for hours. Right? No. Being responsible means you're going to take responsibility for your emotional safety and not stick around while he calls you names. Yeah. So it's going to mean taking actions on your behalf, for sure. And it's definitely going to mean taking responsibility for and shifting the habits of mind, the mental habits, and the nervous system responses that keep you from feeling and responding and behaving in a way that's truly aligned with what you want, with who you are, and with what you value. So again, taking 100% responsibility doesn't mean taking responsibility for other people's behaviors, doesn't mean taking responsibility for, anything your husband is doing, but it means that you always have 100% capacity to respond to those behaviors, those things he's doing, from your highest intelligence, from your wise brain, from your heart, from your own integrity and values, right? And really from a place that's caretaking your own self and caretaking what you most value and hold dear. So I know that was kind of a lot. That's really my definition, a long-winded definition. And I want to kind of illustrate it with this beautiful story about Nelson Mandela. I heard Tara Brach tell this story, and I thought, wow, this is such a powerful story. So I wanted to share it. So when he was imprisoned, he was being not treated well. Let's just put it simply. And after a while, he got depressed. And taking responsibility for that depression, instead of blaming it on the circumstances, this is amazing, right? He took a look at what was creating that for him. And what he realized was that the depression, the pain, that emotional pain was coming from not having anyone to love. It was like this belief that there's no one to love, right? So once he saw that, he realized, wait, that's not true. I have these guards that are with me regularly. Every day I see these guards, these people who hold me captive, and I can love them. So he took loving charge of himself and he loved them. He took charge of his inner world and loved these beings that were not kind to him. And as he did that, what happened is at least one, if not many, of his guards started melting. They started softening and kind of loving him back. And supposedly later at his inauguration, at least one of them was there. And of course, it made his experience in prison so different and so much more beautiful than it could have been. And you'll notice that he wasn't dooming himself to the misery of that pain and that depression by blaming his depression on the treatment he was getting and the circumstances, right, that he was in. Right? Instead, he took responsibility for his own pain and solved for shifting out of that pain and into something much more conducive to a beautiful, loving experience, which was love, right? And this is the ultimate goal. And I just think this is such a beautiful illustration of this. So we need to start there in our marriages by taking responsibility for our own pain, right? With taking responsibility to reduce and melt away the pain we are in, and then to move into the experiences we want to have, the ways we want to feel, the ways we want to show up, right? And this is going to always entail doing what I call a 180-degree pivot, doing a pivot, right? Where we're not looking out at our partner or into the specific circumstances in our lives, but we're pivoting our awareness to ourselves, to look at where we are contributing to the problem, where we are causing our own pain. Because that pain and that problem is always going to be because of a way we are relating to, i.e., thinking about that thing that's happening outside of us, that way our partner is treating us, that prison cell that we're in, yeah? It's always going to be because of how you are relating to it. And again, this is the best news and the worst news, right? A lot of people hear this and get triggered. they feel bad that they are causing their own pain. They don't want to look at themselves that honestly because it can feel so uncomfortable to do so, like self-blame, right? It feels so vulnerable, so raw for some people. And shame comes up. That's like the source, right? It's like shame, and that feels so bad. And to deflect that, they prefer to lay the blame outside themselves, right? It's easier to cast blame as a human, sort of instinctively. It just feels safer and it feels kind of powerful. Some of you listening really get this, right? And some of you listening can be like, oh yeah, my husband does that, right? This is very human, and it so often comes down to like trying to avoid very uncomfortable feelings, right? Taking responsibility can lead to those very uncomfortable feelings, especially when we're doing it wrong. Mostly I want to be talking about you here, right? For you, and I know for me in my life, I have been here. I have been in a place where it felt easier to blame than feel the shame and rawness of owning my part, of owning that I'm creating my experience, right? So I really get it. If taking responsibility, if saying, oh yeah, I'm creating this, and looking at how you're creating that, if that feels uncomfortable. But when we do this, we have no power to change how we feel or the dynamic in our relationship. So you're going to want to do it. You're going to want to learn how to do it and do it well, because it can feel very uncomfortable to take responsibility. But if taking responsibility feels icky or heavy or shameful, the good news is that's because you're doing it wrong. Okay? So with a few tweaks, you can actually do it in a way that feels fun and like the most empowering thing ever. So some people easily embrace seeing where they are responsible for causing their own happiness or hurt or the disconnection they feel in their partnership. Over and over, I see this happening, and I see that these people, these women, are the ones who actually create major, beautiful, loving change in their relationships fast. They don't spend time fighting me. Like in our client calls, they don't spend time fighting me on, well, but wait, isn't that his fault? Like arguing for their partner being the one who's the problem, or telling me that they can't improve things without their partner's help. When I hear that happening, I know my client's not fully taking responsibility yet. They're the ones who get stuck in laying the blame for their unhappiness on their partner or other circumstances. And what happens if I don't catch it and help them shift into self-responsibility, they spiral into more and more emotional pain and stuckness and distance in their marriages. So this is always going to be a first step to shifting your marriage. Is that willingness to take responsibility and to really see that and to look at that. Like, where is it that I'm creating this experience for myself? How is it that I'm doing that? And it's going to be easy to do if you follow the lead of these people who are amazing at taking self-responsibility. So what is their trick? What's the trick to being able to take responsibility this way? What do the people who are good at it have that others don't yet? So the good news is it's nothing that you can't develop, right? So 100% you can develop what these people already have or develop quickly. Their trick is that they do not turn self-responsibility into self-blame. It is not the same thing, right? They don't look through the eyes of, this is good or bad what I'm doing, or wrong or right. Right? They don't look through the eyes of judgment at what's going on in their internal world. Instead, they are more like a scientist, right? They look through objective and curious eyes at themselves. Like, this is happening inside of me. I'm having this experience. Ooh, how interesting. Where is that coming from? Oh, how interesting. Oh, I'm thinking this and this. That's really good to see. In other words, they look at how they're relating to their partner's actions, their partner's words. They look at how they're relating to that with curiosity and objectivity and even neutrality. And the most successful people actually do this with not just curiosity, but a kind attitude towards themselves, with gentleness and compassion and even love for themselves. So for you to be truly successful at it and really access the incredible power of self-responsibility, you must also have a curious, at the least, and ultimately, preferably kind, loving attitude towards your own brain and your own self, your own beautiful mind, body, heart system, right? We don't want to be blaming the problem on who we are. And if we're going to blame anything, we want to blame our pain on the human brain and its ancient primal conditioning, not anything personal, right? On this bigger sort of, oh, wow, humanness, the biology and the way we were shaped as humans that just simply are not your fault. So a lot of our pain comes from the way we see things, the way we think about things, from our lizard brain, as I've talked about a lot, or the ways our brains have been conditioned to see, and like the biases, the negativity bias of our brain. That's where a lot of your pain in your relationship and in your life is coming from, period. But I really want to invite you to have so much compassion for your brain, because it's just doing what it's designed to do, what it's meant to do, what it's been evolved to do to keep the human species alive, to interpret, to judge, to replay old negative stories about yourself and other people. This is what the survival brain has been taught to do, been evolved to do. So there's no need to lay blame on ourselves, to judge ourselves for having brains that do that. Just look at it all with curiosity and even love. Like, how interesting, how fascinating that my mind is thinking this, that I'm relating to his statement that he said like this, that my brain is interpreting, his lack of a hug as meaning he doesn't love me, for example. So this is really one of the keys to making self-responsibility feel a lot lighter, to bring in that perspective, to bring in that curiosity, to bring in that love and kindness. To me, this doesn't just lighten it, but it actually makes it kind of fun. Because then I feel like I'm just kind of a detective, like looking for the source of my pain, kind of the way I would like do a puzzle or solve a crossword puzzle or something. And then another key to make it even more empowering to take self-responsibility and even more fun is knowing that just because your brain is, doing its lizard thing now, like I was just saying, like judging or interpreting in negative ways, right? Just because your brain has a tendency to do that now, right? Creating that pain and that disconnection for you, it doesn't mean you're stuck that way or can't learn how to use your brain in order to do the opposite, to create more love instead of pain, right? More connection instead of division. You 100% can learn to do that. And maybe you just haven't learned how to work with your brain so that it doesn't constantly create this pain for you, but instead starts creating more and more love and connection and intimacy and all the good things, right? You haven't learned yet just because you weren't taught. But it is totally possible for you. And so like knowing that can really free you up to feel more empowered about it and motivated and energized, right? Instead of like shut down by taking responsibility for your experience. So for me, like seeing how I create my own pain in my relationship, seeing how my brain does that and my nervous system does that, it also means that I have the power to uncreate it and to create the love I want, right? Which is the best news in the world. So for me, knowing all of this is how I never feel bad for seeing how I am creating my own experience and my own pain in my marriage. I actually love discovering when I'm thinking in a way that's holding me back from what I want. I totally welcome it because it means now I know where my work is. It's like a big X on a treasure map, right? Like X marks the spot. Dig here and find gold. If you listen to my recent episode with my husband, episode 100, or a couple episodes back where I talked about non-negotiable wants, you'll have heard me and us talking about the hard experience we went through in our this summer together in our relationship. And it was like gold when I took responsibility for my pain that I was experiencing. When I recognized, as I talked about it in those episodes, the emotional need that I had and that it was my responsibility to meet that need for myself. But even just the act of being willing to look at myself and being like, all right, where is this really coming from? This pain that I'm experiencing. That allowed me to see it and then totally shift it. And ultimately, as he and I talked about on our episode, like to move our relationship forward, to make it even better in the long run, like it is now. Like we have deeper, better understandings of each other and more intimacy and knowledge of each other and ways of navigating our lives together that are just improved. That just simply wouldn't have been possible without self-responsibility, without me taking responsibility for myself. So that's a key for you too, is knowing that taking responsibility and discovering what's inside of you that's holding you back from the love that you want is the very thing that's going to help you have that love that you want. It's gold to reorient you towards more of the love and the connection and the joy that you want with your partner. So I just want to reiterate in a more simple way right now. When we take responsibility for the hurt we feel, it lets us get to work to lessen or eliminate it. It frees us up to stop feeling so bad and start feeling really good. Start feeling strong and loving and powerful or empowered and tender and compassionate and connected and treasured and in love. And it allows you to be much more effective in how you address any issue with your partner, such as asking him to shift the way he spoke with you or to you, or sharing with him in an undefended way how his speaking to you affected you. Sharing that in a way that's much more likely to actually get through to him, right? That's what I mean by undefended. Which, of course, is going to have a better chance of him actually wanting to be more sensitive and loving and kind and caring with you, right? Because it's coming from a less triggered space inside of yourself. It's coming from an effective, self-responsible, grounded, loving space. A self and partner and marriage advocating place inside of you. That's the power of self-responsibility. It's truly the ultimate in empowerment when it comes to our marriages and our relationships. So if you can really start seeing it in these ways, it's going to feel so much more fun and even like you're going to want to do it. And to just briefly reiterate the things that you can do to make self-responsibility fun, the perspectives to take on it are when you're not as happy as you want to be, or when there's some sort of problem that you experience in your marriage, you want to do a pivot and look at how you are responsible for that experience. And you want to do that not from, I did something wrong, I'm bad, I'm screwing this up, there's something wrong with me, but from, I wonder what's going on in me that would lead to me having this experience. I'm so curious, and be like a scientist looking at objectively what's going on there. And to take that further, meeting what's going on inside of you with compassion, because of course it's going on in you. You're a human being, and this is what human beings' brains and nervous systems do. And we can even love and admire that part of ourselves for doing that as an act of protection. We can even say, thank you, brain, for trying to do this for me. So have that kind attitude towards your brain and your nervous system. And know that you can learn how to support your brain and nervous system to have a very different experience. Come in to look at what's going on in yourself with the intention of shifting yourself out of the pain and into more of the love and all the experiences and emotions that you want to experience. That's why we do it. That's why we take responsibility. And think of it as a puzzle to solve, one that bears golden treasure, one that's such a gift to yourself when you solve it. In other words, know that it's the ticket to having the love and the experience that you want in your marriage. This is going to make it so much easier and so much more fun to take responsibility, which will allow you to actually do it, which will allow you to actually shift everything in the direction you want it to go in your marriage. Just the most empowering thing for you in your marriage. Now, of course, when I work with my clients, we really dive into exactly how to take responsibility, because I know that it can still potentially to you sound a little vague. And I always have my clients really learn exactly how to take self-responsibility, what it actually means. And we break it down into little steps and very specific ways of doing that. So when you decide to coach with me, we will certainly do that for you and really get you into this place where you feel so empowered to create the marriage that you want with your honey. Now, next week, we are going to talk about being transparent, authentic, and open with yourself, or what I call having sensitive awareness of your own brain, which is really the fundamental skill that's really part and parcel of self-responsibility. So you can begin the real work of self-responsibility, right? That's one of the things we're going to talk about next week to help you really harness your power to really shift things in your marriage for the very best. And as part of this episode next week, I'm going to be taking you through a process to sort of end and close out last year and make this year the year when everything changes for the very best in your marriage. And this process is really taking a deep look at where you were creating more pain for yourself and where you can create more love and joy for yourself in your marriage this next year. So I wanted to do today's episode first to set you up for that episode, to make it more fun for you, because this is a piece of self-responsibility. All right, I will see you next week, and do not forget to sign up and be there for the Stop Taking It So Personally challenge, 7 days to feel less hurt and more love. The link to sign up is in the show notes or over on my website, www.lifeisworthloving.com. Be oh so well.